Welcome to the Soft Rebellion podcast, a homecoming to the creative power of your female body. Our world uproots us from the gifts of the feminine, the intuitive, the instinctual, the cyclical, the soft. What's the result? Patriarchal cultures of perfectionism, shame, and disconnect that leave us constantly running, never arriving. Imagine a world of women softly rebelling, claiming our cyclicity, our weirdness and our rest as we courageously cultivate a deep and delicious relationship to our female bodies. My name is Florina. I'm an osteopath, dancer, writer and coach. I've been on my own journey sparked by an eating disorder to come home to the wild, poetic anatomy of my female body and awaken my creative power. And I invite you to join me and my guests, trailblazing teachers, healers and creatives, as we each reclaim our own soft rebellion. Welcome to another episode of the Soft Rebellion podcast. You are never not embodied. You are a body. As my today's guest says, a treasure trove of wisdom and native intelligence. There's a bubbling abundance of insight within you, but it's not something you can access through the mind alone. And that's why we are called to give authority back to the body, to let her know she can be trusted and to rewild our experience, which is the sacred return to our true nature. But what does it really mean to live in our body again, to stop outsourcing truth to the mind and remember the language of sensation, instinct and pleasure? Well, in this episode, I'm joined by the wonderful Michaela Boehm. Michaela teaches and counsels internationally as an expert in intimacy and relationships. Born and raised in Austria, she combines a background in psychology and extensive clinical counseling experience with deep training in the yogic arts. Her unique body of work sits at the intersection of embodiment and intimacy. Michaela is the author of The Wild Woman's Way and the founder of the non-linear movement method, a powerful somatic release practice. And together with her, we explored exactly those questions which I've just thrown at you and through which I'm inviting you to listen to this wonderful, deeply insightful conversation with Michaela. Welcome on the Soft Rebellion podcast, Michaela. Warm welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here with me. I know how excited my listeners will be to hear from you. And I have so many questions I would like to ask you, but I would like to start, as I always do in my podcast, which is a body check-in. And I would love to hear how you are today and what your body is telling you today. How are you, Michaela?
I think my body's very happy today. I start my day early and at this time of the year I can watch the sunrise and then I go for a nice hike and then I do some movement and then I do some gardening and then I start work. So I've already had quite a bit of movement and nature and things out there. So everything feels good.
Nice. Yeah, it's 9 a.m. at your end and 5 p.m. on my end.
That's right. Yes.
And I come from I've been the whole day in practice doing osteopathy on bodies. So I come from movement and body too, but very much in dialogue with my patients. Yeah, you have decades of experience in intimacy, sexuality, and embodiment, and really what it all comes back to, and that's what we have in common, I guess, is coming home to our body, to the natural wisdom and intelligence of our body. And yeah, the subtitle of the Soft Rebellion podcast is a homecoming. I often say, to the creative power of the female body. That's really, yeah, that's my small body of work too. And I would love to start tracking this with you a little bit with your life story. You describe in your book, The Wild Woman's Way, which I'd love to talk about today so beautifully and wildly. You grew up in Austria, want to become a witch. And yeah, that's where I would like to give the word to you. And I wonder if you could walk us into your story and into your homecoming journey to your body, and maybe also take us back to when you didn't feel the way you felt this morning, for example.
Yeah. I mean, it's a long story, and I don't think we want to spend the entire podcast on the long story. But like you said, I've been at this for a long time. I mean, I've been in private practice for close to 30 years now, and I've done teaching before then, and I'm still teaching. So it's been a long time of engaging with the subject, which included, of course, my own journey very strongly, because I would say I was very embodied as a child and as a young woman, as many people growing up, in Austria, or in Europe in general. I think when I grew up, there was no option other than to be outside and playing till the sun would go down, however late that was in the summer, and I rode horses, and I was a skier, and all of those kind of things that effortlessly make you embodied. And so I never questioned embodiment. And then, of course, things like schooling happens, and work happens, and getting ahead happens, and but I do think that my break from embodiment, or my disconnection from my body, didn't actually happen till I moved to the States, simply because it was the confluence of, a strange country, a different culture, having to essentially start from scratch. And, I knew one person when I moved to Los Angeles. So it took a lot of work and a lot of effort and a lot of focus, and none of that had to do with the body. And then, of course, when you live in a town that is not Los Angeles till this day is not a town where people walk like in other cities, right? You drive everywhere, and it's very spread out, and so it didn't have the culture that I was used to from Vienna or Hamburg or Düsseldorf, were the places I lived, where you walk everywhere, and that's not in question. So there came this moment where I realized very strongly that I had lost touch with my body, and that I had essentially gone in my head and pushed forward with things that were very stressful. And I worked very long hours. There was a time where I essentially had a day job to support going back to schooling, and I did client hours at the same time. And so I would easily do 14, 15-hour days. No questions asked, every day, every day, every week. And so that's when my real having to reconnect with my own body started. I think nowadays, when we look at what people are going through, it's all of that, plus social media, plus computers, plus devices of all kinds, and the influx that I didn't have, thankfully, not to that extent. I mean, yes, there were computers and emails and things, but not like now. So that's how it was for me personally. And so the practices I've been given, both in my schooling as well as in my the things that my teacher taught me, came in very handy at that point, because I had to really come back into my body and connect with my body, and make sure that I was connected, not only physically and health-wise, but also from a more decision intuition place and fostering some vitality and creativity. And I did that all over, the period of a few years where I really honed in on the practices that work the best. And I have to say that I was very lucky, because one of the ways that I did that was, this is, my story, however you want to say that, was that I gathered a few women who I knew, I had met, and I think a few of my early clients, and I started a kind of a weekly and then bi-weekly gathering where we would meet at my house, and we do things, like movement practice and flavor practice and all different kinds of things to experiment with what worked best. And so I essentially started informal teaching at that point. And so informal in the sense that it was the same 4 women for the first, I don't know, 6-7 months. And so we just played around. And then more women showed up and more women showed up. And so it became this thing where every other week on a Thursday, people could come. I renovated my garage into a little studio. And so I had to constantly come up with things that worked even for people who were new and who didn't know anything about embodiment or, practice or things like that. And so that's kind of how I honed a big part of my work. This is in the late 90s, mind you, which is kind of, the ancient past, where I just get to really, really play. And funny enough, because I had to constantly come up with new things, but they had to be things that all people could do, new people as well as people who've been around for a while. I kind of, till this day, look at these practices kind of as the basis of what I do, because, they're so simple yet so potent. And then, of course, I did an enormous amount of teaching and traveling and client hours. I've done over 35,000 one-on-one client hours in my career. And I no longer or barely actively do one-on-one sessions. I have a few clients, but I mostly teach nowadays. So everything I've done and for myself, I've then given, to teaching and clients. And I'm still actively developing material. I never teach the same workshop twice, really, till this day. And every year has a theme, and every year I develop new material with, based on my own interests and practice.
Thank you so much for sharing. And, as I listen to you, I can resonate with so many moments in your life. It's so beautifully how you said, effortlessly embodied. Yes, that's exactly how I remember my child. It's actually beautiful, effortlessly embodied. And, in that moment, I think, wow, embodiment is such a big word. And so often we feel we need to work so hard to be embodied, when really, what does embodiment mean? I always want to first say we cannot not be embodied, right?
That's right.
And maybe actually, let us dive in a little bit deeper there, because I feel there is also so many, I don't know, I want to say misconception or myth, or many people are talking about embodiment, but what does it really mean? And I'm very curious now, how can we remember or re-engage again effortlessly with embodiment, because our body body is embodied.
Right. Yes. And I think that's a very important point, right? We're never not embodied. Meaning, as long as we're alive and we have a body, and we're always in our body, and we're always connected to our body. And so in my work, because I also train teachers nowadays, right, I developed this entire movement method. And so I teach teachers in both my women's work and in the somatic modality that I've developed, and in the couples work. So, I have many layers where people can learn. And this is always the basis. The basis is we are embodied. We are a body. Our body has the kind of wisdom that we cannot actually acquire mentally, because, of course, our bodies have been at it, meaning at surviving and thriving, way longer than we had fully developed brains. So really, our body is this treasure trove of wisdom and of native intelligence. And what we have to do very often is we have to step out of the way. And so in my work, a lot of the work is to step out of the way. I'm sure it's the same for you, right? You essentially, facilitate the body's ability to right itself, which the body has. And homeostasis is what we are built for. And very often our ideas of how to get into our body or how to, create homeostasis are not what the body needs or wants, right, at all. And so that's the important piece, that we are capable of actually, let's say, giving the authority back to the body so that the body can actually do what the body does best. And so in my work and how I teach my teachers is that I say that embodiment is the ability to listen to the messages that the body always sends. Always sends, that the body always speaks to us. There's never a moment where the body does not give us messages. It's just that we don't hear them. And we don't hear them for a number of reasons, some of which have to do with the enormous overload that we experience, both mental as well as external, noise, whatever, right? All of that. And then also things like stress, anxiety, overthinking, all of those kind of things, extreme workloads, and of course, trauma, and trauma in the widest sense, right? People have, trauma is like the new, I don't know, trauma is the new attachment theory or whatever, right? Like every couple of years, there's like this pop culture fad of something that we now all have to, every boyfriend is a narcissist, and then we all have trauma, and then we all have, anxious attachment or whatever. And there's, of course, positive aspects to people getting educated, but there's a lot more to it than, the pop culture thing. So I'm saying this to say trauma to me is any injury of any kind, emotional, physical, mental, spiritual, that requires that our body needs to react and our body needs to cope. And so that is, of course, one of the many reasons why we don't hear the messages of our body, because we're cut off from those messages through the things that have happened. And so the interesting thing is that when we talk about effortless embodiment is our birthright, right? That is what we're built for. Pleasure is our birthright. Intuition is our birthright. All of these things are native to us. And very often we have these intense strategies to force something that comes natural. And so a lot of my work has to do with kind of peeling back the layers of doing and effort and force and, all these arcane, practices to somehow make something happen, where if you go here, body, do what you do best, the body does it and does it happily and joyously. And so that's why embodiment is such an interesting and tricky thing, because people force external practice on something that actually has to come from the inside. And our job in the realm of embodiment really is to give the power back to the natural world, to the body. And in my book, I talk a lot about rewilding, meaning the act of coming back to our original nature, and the wild woman essentially is the archetype of coming back to wilderness, right? People always think it's fangs and claws and screaming and shouting, but really what it is it's our, native state, our natural state.
Oh, you said so many wonderful things, which I just thought, yes, absolutely. Stepping out of the way. I always think, so many patients, I often talk with patients about breathing and they come and tell, oh, someone told me to do this and this and this. And I say, well, your job is to get out of the way of breathing.
Thank you.
Why do you breathe into your belly if you have I always think there are no lungs in the belly, so don't breathe into the belly.
You know,
you can watch the movement of the breath.
Right. I'm so glad you say that, because that is one of my big pet peeves. Big pet peeve, right? People, excuse my language, but people, no, I'm not going to say that word, but people mess with their breath, right? They force their breath to do things. And really,
Absolutely.
I mean, it's okay to have some strategies for extreme anxiety and calming down and things like that. So it's not that all breath work is bad or something like that. It's just that it has a limit. And the limit is that when we force breath on our body, we are saying, my mind, and the person I learned this from, knows better than you, body. And with that split, that, let's say, disconnect between the bodily intelligence and the mind happens. And our body will start mistrusting us if we force, certain need to behave, so to speak, on the body. And that's why a lot of people have chronic pain and, like all kinds of stuff happening, because the body system essentially goes, my human's mind can't be trusted, right? I have to scream louder, or I have to clench to protect myself because, oh, here we go again, hot yoga, stretching beyond what I'm actually capable of, and so the tension gets stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger instead of less. And so breath and forcing breath is one of the ways that people really interfere with the body's natural ability to right itself. Because I'm saying this, this, I'm just saying this for people listening, right? Our body is built to breathe exactly such that we get the optimal amount of oxygen. This is why when you look at a baby, right, and an infant, once again, effortless embodiment, when you look at an infant, you'll see that an infant's breath is very irregular. Right? They take a deep breath, then they take a few shallow breaths, then they do one of those breaths.
Yes.
Right? And there's so in a baby, the impulse is still completely perfect and active, where the body inhales as deeply as much oxygen is needed. And when there isn't so much oxygen is needed, then the breath gets more shallow. When more oxygen is needed, there's a few deep, breaths needed. When there's a de-escalation needed, there's that physiological sigh, that, which, by the way, is the only kind of breath that really makes a difference on the nervous system. If you do need to regulate, right, suddenly, urgently, that actually does help. But once again, you want to get to that naturally. So that's something that very often people fight against, like very badly, right? And like you said, the deepen the belly breath. It's like, well, do you really need to breathe that deep in the belly while you're laying down? Probably not. Yeah.
Yeah, how does our mind, and then how would a teacher's mind know how my body needs to breathe in that moment, right?
That's right. Well, that's the problem. Yeah,
we give away the authority. That's what he said before. And I feel, Michaela, you just said something really important there, and I want to dive a little bit deeper into that. You talked about how the body starts to mistrust us, and you briefly mentioned body's mind and mind. And I just feel in that moment that's probably something which, and I also think about this concept of introverted patriarchy, which I find is exactly what happens in so many women's bodies, right? We keep up this controlling, pushing, practice this, thinking we're doing good, but really we are maintaining something where we mistrust ourselves even more. And I wonder if we can dive a little bit deeper in there, or maybe then also what way of working is, because the interesting thing was we always feel I need to trust my body, but thank you for reminding my body needs to trust me.
Yeah.
So what is required from us so that I can create this potent relationship where I trust her, but
Yes.
equally she feels safe with the way I handle her.
Yes, exactly. I think, that's I would say the underpinning of a lot of my work is just, and this is for men and women alike, right? This is not different for men in the sense that the kind of force that we put on our bodies makes our bodies mistrust us. It's just that in women, there's an added issue here in the sense that all our reproductive force and our vitality comes from our lower body. And so when we're constantly disconnecting from our lower body because we're pulling all the available energy up into our head, and everything pools in your neck and shoulders and jaw, and it's this whole thing where essentially you are like a talking head on a stick, so to speak, right? Energetically speaking. That has a very strong effect on not only our intuition and creativity, but our ability to perceive pleasure, but also the reproductive aspect of our bodies. And so it is very important that not only do we mentally understand that we need to trust our body, we need to let our body know that we can be trusted. So, for instance, I have this modality in nonlinear movement that's called moving what you're feeling. And first of all, people constantly bastardize the name and they go, moving your feelings. And that's not the same, because what I'm looking at in that modality is something that now in neuroscience is called interoceptive awareness. And so interoceptive awareness is our ability to feel our own inner landscape. And so you started our conversation by saying, let's check in with your body, right? And so when we check in with our body, what we're doing is we are creating a moment of interoceptive awareness. And the way that happens is you feel physical sensations, right? And the important piece right there is that the physical sensations are not immediately evaluated into good or bad. That's the first thing that most people have a very hard time with, right? Anything that feels stuck or tense or achy or negative is bad. And that's not true. To be, that's hands down the first issue to address, right? It's a sensation. That sensation is a set of messages. Those are good messages. They're the messages of the body saying, here are things to tend to. Here are warnings. Here are little alarm bells. Here is something to think about, and so on, right? So sensation isn't good or bad. Sensation is just sensation. Then, of course, the next thing that happens is emotions connected with those sensations, or separate, right? I mean, you can be feeling happy but still have anxious emotions, but often they stack up, right? You have a certain contraction in your solar plexus, you have anxious, emotions, you have anxious thoughts, right? So that's your inner landscape at that particular moment. So most interoceptive awareness is a physical sensation, emotions that are connected or running parallel, mental, sensations and appearances that have to do with what we're feeling. So that's interoceptive awareness. Once we have interoceptive awareness, we are embodied, meaning we are now capable of feeling the messages of our body, perceiving the messages of our body. When we do something like a body check-in or a body scan, what we're doing is we're essentially training our ability to translate what the body says into mental awareness. It's also very important, particularly for things like boundary setting or knowing when to stop a workout or, things of that nature. So it's not just the body, it's not just the emotion, it's not just the mind. It's lining those things up so there is cohesive and coherent understanding and action. So, but then what happens is, right, so I have people do that both in my women's work and in the nonlinear movement. There is that modality where You essentially start moving with whatever you're perceiving, whatever you're feeling, which is not your feelings, but sensations, emotions, thoughts, right? Could be anything. And then the first thing that happens is people classify something as not right and pop it out, throw it out, pop it off, right? Bypass it, make it go away. So, for instance, I slept on my left shoulder somehow last night. Still a bit jet lagged, so I kind of pass out at some point in some odd posture, and I woke up with this, kind of shoulder thing. So if I start moving that, it's unpleasant, and it's actually unpleasant all the way down to the side. So if I immediately go, oh, I can't have that, let me pop that out, like let me stretch it, let me, do this thing and, press here and use a thing and, all of that. What I've done is I haven't gone, what is this about? Where is it coming from? What's underneath? Is there something underneath, right? So in this case, there isn't so much underneath because it's a almost technical, right, like mechanical thing that happened from. But sometimes I have things where when I stop and I go, what is this? There's a sensation under it that's actually emotional, right? It's a refusal of something, or something I haven't processed yet, or anticipation. Doesn't have to be negative, but if I immediately fix what's wrong, right, then I have not listened all the way. And so my body will not be satisfied. And that's the thing that most people have a very hard time understanding. So you can do a hot yoga class, and hot yoga is just an example. I have nothing against hot yoga, I want to say that. But a lot of times people go there and they overstretch and they push through something because they can. And then the body in the aftermath goes, ouch, right? And closes back down. So it's much better to go, oh, this hurts, this hurts, this hurts, this hurts. I'm going to let it hurt. I'm going to let it hurt. I'm going to see what happens. So even if I just do this right now, there's a sensation connected with it. And the sensation is kind of that kind of a sensation. So if I would pop that out, my body would hold on to that sensation because I didn't actually listen. But if I just let it unwind itself, eventually there was now a deeper breath, and it kind of opened up a bit, and now I can move on. And that's the reestablishing of the trust between the body and the mind, because the body went, okay, she didn't just brutalize us, she didn't just not listen. Because the body very often says, listen to me, listen to me, listen to me, listen to me. And we don't. And then, people end up on your table, and they end up, all kinds of places, because there isn't an acceptance of the fact that sensation is a message. It's not always a bad message, but it is a message. And when we get used to sensation and emotion and thought being a message, then we can go, what's that about? Yeah.
Yes, I just say it's so refreshing, and it's many thigh evoking to listen to you, because I mean, like, yeah, 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 absolutely. And talking about our true nature, I always talk about silent felt sensation being our true and first ever language, yeah. Right? I talk a lot and think a lot and write a lot about the embryo, and how as an embryo we grew because we receive touch and sensation and smell and movement, and it's for our body something so ancient, right? And I was thinking also, thank you so much for reminding us too, it's not about fixing what is wrong, and that's exactly where I feel break deep layered also societal cycles, right? To allow to get intimate with that which feels maybe very gunky and disturbing.
Yeah.
That's where we say, no, I'm not just following the fast world around where I need to fix and move on and grow and bam, bam, bam. But I dare to sit with the disturbance, with the discomfort.
Yeah.
And that's where trust comes in. And that's where I feel when it's hard. I don't always manage myself, but in these moments where I feel I dare to trust that very uncomfortable peace.
Yeah.
I sense I connect with something divine or something very, something ungraspable nearly.
Yeah. 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 And that's always available. And that's,
Yes.
we also have to say, right, aside from the very like meat and bones, there's a mystery there, right?
Yeah.
There is a mystery. That's where we touch the magic or the mystery of creation, so to speak, right? In that moment where we don't always already know what's happening. We don't always already bypass the sensation for better, or optimizing or whatever. And it's not easy because turning towards sensation requires guts.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I would love to. I know that my softly rebellious community, all of those women, there is this collective longing to connect to the archetypal force of the feminine, the wild feminine. And there is actually in the Wild Woman's Way, there is this one beautiful sentence, I've typed it out, where we say, we are longing to connect to the ancient part of us that knows the rising of the moon and the movement of the tides, the instinctual, deeply connected aspects in each of us that has survived and thrived in the wilderness for many thousands of years. Mm-hmm. And I wonder, how could we, if we, for the I'm also aware of time, could tap a little bit into that, the wild feminine land, the rewilding land. And maybe one way of doing that, you said before how we disconnect from the lower body, become a talking head on a stick, and the inability to receive pleasure. And with that, I also then think, wow, live and thrive in our sexuality. I hand it over to you.
Well, I think, everything we've just talked about is the entry into that wild instinctual nature, because our body knows things that that are built in long, like I said before, we had fully developed brains even. And so when we understand that a lot of those wild instinctual things happen in the body, particularly in the lower body, then we can connect with those parts via the lower body. And so one of the things that most people are not, let's say, cognitively knowing, they know it, but they don't think about it that way, is that the reason why we're talking heads on a stick is literally because our body distributes energy where energy is needed. And when we talk about energy here, we're not talking about some kind of woo-woo, whatever, right? We're talking about actual electrical energy emitted from the cortex of the brain. Because human beings are electrical beings, and we begin anything that happens gets first emitted as electrical energy on the cortex of the brain. That jumps down into the neural pathways, and from there through the body and the muscles, and neurotransmitters get, unfolded and everything. So the really important thing to know is that we have a finite energy output. So we can only produce a certain amount per second. Because of that, our bodies are energy management geniuses. So that's very, very important, right? We really are built to use the energy optimally. So when we are, let's say, going into the realms of thinking, doing, striving, focusing, we need to do that with our brains and our mind and our, mouth and our eyes and whatever. So the energy will be pulled up into those areas so we can have everything available that's available, because it's finite. We can't plug in extra RAM. So you and I are just sitting here right now in chairs, right? And so we talk. And so what that, of course, means is we don't need energy in our legs. We don't need energy in our hips other than, maintenance. We need energy in our neck and shoulders and head and brain. So, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I call it the go mode. So there's nothing wrong with being in go mode. The thing is that all things in the body are learned through repetition. So whatever we do the most has the strongest pattern. The strongest pattern is the pattern that the electrical energy accesses automatically, because electrical energy goes the path of least resistance. So the bigger the freeway, the quicker it goes down there. If you have some overgrown little path and need a machete to get through, that's not the preferred way. So now we've spent 10 hours or 8 hours, in our heads and talking, and now we want to connect with our wild instinctual nature, and we don't have pathways. We have that as a birthright, but we don't have muscle, right? We are like these bodybuilders that only train their upper body, and then they have these sticky little legs.
Yes.
That's us very often. So when we look at how do we connect with pleasure and wildness and our instinctual nature, is we have to create pathways that allow us to very quickly, actively get into the lower body. And things to do that are hip circles, very, very simple. Hip circles, squats, rolling around on the floor, non-linear movement, meaning movement that doesn't follow a structure, dancing, a lot of people use trampolines, things like that, anything that actually activates the lower body. So we kind of body build the ability to bring the energy back down. Once the energy is back down, the energy in the lower part of the body will light up our pleasure, will light up our intuition, will give us the ability to have vibrancy in the body. When we do things like hip circles, for instance, or even, massaging of the feet, all of those kind of things, energy follows attention, right? This is really important. Energy follows attention. So wherever we put our attention, the energy flows. And so doing things that create pathways while also reversing the energy flow makes a very big change very quickly. So quickly that people are surprised, because they're like, oh, that's so surprising. I do 5 minutes of hip circles a day and I feel so much better within a week. Yes, because it's your birthright. You're just opening the floodgates. And once you do that, then the next step and the next step and the next step reveals itself. So, if you don't have, the ability to do much, do simple things. Do very, very simple things.
Yeah, and I think now find your own way of bringing the energy into that body part, and finding the way which I enjoy, which you enjoy. I think what I really appreciate so far is that we don't talk about specific practices, because one thing I always observe is that people ask for another practice before they even really engaged with what I told them or what I suggested. It's that kind of, I call it the chasing for give me more, when, what do I try to say? I think it's not helpful to just serve more practices, but I think I say that so easy now, I'm sure I'm sometimes the same. But I really hear that invitation to understand, it's about, isn't it also about, Michaela, to actually, it's about education. That's what it boils back down, to understand how our bodies work, because we go to school, we learn language and French and math and blah, blah, but no one tells us what you just told me, unless we study sports science. But we shouldn't have to study sports science to understand.
That's right.
How energy flows.
Yes, but we sometimes have to, and we don't have to study sports science necessarily, but we do need, it is about education, and large portions of my book are about educating on those things, because you know, we do have good brains, and when our brains understand things, they are much more cooperative as well. So, yes, it's both education, but it's also just understanding that you cannot armchair your way into embodiment. You have to actually use your body for embodiment. And there's no ifs, whens, and buts. And a lot of people somehow think that if they just say the right things or wear the right kinds of outfits, the rest will follow. And that's not the case. But also, it's not arduous. It shouldn't be hard. Who has hours a day for practices and rituals? You know, very few people do. Some people are lucky enough. They can spend the entire day, you know, doing those things. But those people don't need practices. You know, they're once again probably relaxed enough. And, you know, we see this, of course, also that when people, for whatever reason, suddenly get a bit of space and time, you know, they go something like, wow, it only took me a few days till I could feel things again and till I felt like eating better or going on hikes, right? So very often it's not so much about what you do, it's about doing less. Yeah. And that's, of course, also hard sometimes because we're
It's
so,
hard.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it's embodiment. It's a journey of, I did lots of Alexander techniques. It's about undoing, and goodness me, undoing is not easy to unlearn also all the things which doesn't actually serve us. Tension is it's easier for a baby to just learn it from scratch, right?
I,
than
yeah,
for us to unlearn. Absolutely. But what I really hear is, in a way, right, rewilding is I want to say resensing, but rewilding is sensing.
yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because it can, if you just read the title, you know, one might think, oh, what does that all entail? But actually, I mean, it also is quite very
Yeah.
grounded and
Yeah.
earthy.
Yeah. It's less is more in this case. Yeah.
I'm aware of time, but I wonder, we still have a little bit of time, if you could talk a little bit to shame, because that's something which came up in a few questions in community, to how to, I mean, it's not a huge topic, but maybe you just have something to say about listeners or women who experience shame towards their body, and especially towards the lower body, and already just the sort of circling my hips and kind of, and I don't experience it, but I can kind of feel that, how one can also kind of feel that kind of being pushed away from one's own, engaging with one's own lower body. And I just hear those listeners, and I wonder if you have something to say about that, and how we can meet feeling ashamed
Yeah.
towards meeting our lower body,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah. Well, I think once again, like we talked about with the breath, the important piece is that there is no one size fits all approach, and that our connection to our bodies and how we engage should not have a certain way that it looks or it has to be expressed. One of my, you know, pains when I see some of the stuff that's out there, you know, the divine feminine, whatever, is that it's essentially a forcing of a certain frame that all women are supposed to be this way, or all women are supposed to dress this way, or sigh like this, or moan this way, or whatever, right? And so there, I think, is yet another layer of imposition that can cause shame. And so I think the important piece to begin with for anybody who goes, oh, can I really, should I, what does, you know, is to go, it doesn't matter what it looks on the outside. What's important is, can you actually have a moment where you feel good in your body, right? Just a moment where you feel good in your body. And very often what that means is that you simply focus on an area that doesn't feel bad or shameful or whatever, right? And maybe that is not your hips, and maybe that's not, you know, even hip circles, but maybe you'll just massage your feet or you stretch your toes and you have a moment of, this feels nice, right? So you meet your body and yourself where you are at. And one of the things in the book is that I had to fight very hard for is that all the practices are in the last third of the book. Because, of course, right, they wanted everything to be interspersed in the chapters. And chapters have stuff because I had to do that. But I know for a fact that I don't go back through chapters and find things. So I wanted everything together. So you can just open the last third of the book and you'll find all these practices that are all only 2, 3, 4 minutes long. You can stretch them out, but where you can meet yourself where you're at. Maybe it's just massaging your hands and feeling good for a moment. Maybe it's just stretching your toes. Maybe it is a bit of hip circles while you're in your chair, right? So the focus isn't on sex or pleasure or whatever performance. The focus is on feeling good. Can you feel good? And then that somewhat opens a different door than you have to be, the sex goddess or feel enormous pleasure at all times or whatever, because sometimes we don't, and sometimes that's also not appropriate for whatever reason, right? But feeling good is possible. Feeling good in your body is possible. It's possible by both feeling things that already feel good, also by feeling things that don't feel painful, right? Sometimes some people have chronic pain. The only thing they can do is find something on their body that doesn't hurt. That's fine too, right? Or maybe you have an area that feels actually really good, even though you have chronic pain or shame or regret, right? You find something that actually works for you. And one of the things that I used to have a lot of my clients do, I used to run a rehab a long, long time ago, where there's a lot of very deep shame and things. Is I used to have people praise their own body. I'd find something to say about a few body parts that was positive. The strong legs or the steady feet or the pretty nails or whatever, right? Like so it went away from the let's say judgment, and it went towards function and goodness. And so that's one way that you can definitely do as a means to overcoming shame or bypassing, in that case, bypassing shame. Yeah.
Thank you so much for speaking that. And one thing which I really take from what you just, two things, but one is really, if we do meet shame or anything along that line, to have this check in with ourselves. Do I right now buy into something or try to copy or expose something onto me which isn't mine? Because as you said, there is not this one social media sex goddess or divine feminine which just we have to all, and it so easily comes across like that because everyone talks about the sacredness and feminine. There is so much so that it can so I have to say that for myself, and I feel that's really important to be said, like it's about finding our way. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And also I think coming back to what we said in the beginning, if you see shame as a sensation, or as a sign versus as a problem, then you can go, oh, what is this feeling telling me? And then that's a different story.
Absolutely. I want to say I feel ashamed, and where is it in my body? And then I said at the beginning, just start to, and then it becomes actually often so joyful and curious because wow, you can describe it in so many colors and tastes, and it becomes an inner landscape. And we made a full circle. And for me, that's definitely, it's about, I call it the wild and poetic anatomy of the female body. And that is about, enlivening our innerness. Thank you so much for your incredible, I want to say, wisdom, knowledge, and generosity of keep working and researching and writing and sharing and dedicating your lifetime to that.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you, dear Michaela, for being with me, for being with us and sharing your incredible wisdom, experience, and love for the body, embodiment, intimacy with me and you and us. And thank you, dear listener, for being with me, for journeying with me week by week, for showing up. I just want to say how much that means to me. And as always, this is a conversation. The Soft Rebellion is a conversation. And I'm looking forward to hear from you and to hear what are your greatest takeaways from this episode. You can always send me an email, softrebellion@florinatali.com, or tag me on Instagram or social media @florina.tali. Yeah, what is left to say? I wish you a wonderful summer, and I'll be with you soon. You might have noticed, there is one more thing to say. You might have noticed that I'm a little bit less frequent in podcasts, and this is because I've moved the Soft Rebellion to Substack, so that the weeks when I'm not releasing a conversation, I share with you my writing, a blog, articles. And if you would like to join me on that journey too, I invite you to head over to Substack and become my subscriber for free. Lots of love.